Wow. Wow. Great stuff. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, what could possibly go wrong? Thank you for that fantastic welcome. Do you know, I have spent 25 years of my life fighting against the new, undemocratic, bureaucratic, and increasingly authoritarian form of rule that comes from Brussels. And I've got to tell you, the day my fellow countrymen, on June the 23rd, 2016, despite the threats, despite the bullying, voted for our country to be free again was the proudest day of my life. Because if you think about it, no free people would ever willingly give up the right to govern themselves, would they? They wouldn't do it. It doesn't happen through the history of mankind, and yet it happened to us because all the way through, going back 45, 50 years, we were assured, don't worry your little heads, this is just about trade. It won't affect your sovereignty. It won't affect your independence. And I'm sure you've heard one or two of those arguments here in the Republic of Ireland. The whole thing, frankly, has been a gigantic con from the word go. And I'm pleased to see that since the Brexit vote, we've got Eurosceptic parties springing up right across Europe. In Sweden, a Eurosceptic party currently tops the polls. In France, there are now a variety of Eurosceptic parties on both the right and the left. In Germany, a brand new Eurosceptic party achieved nearly 100 seats in the Bundestag. And if you go to the east of Europe, if you go to Hungary, you go to Poland, you go to the Czech Republic, you go to Slovakia, just look at what those prime ministers are standing up and saying about the attempt by Brussels to impose migrant quotas on them. Just look at what they're saying. Indeed, the UK commentator Andrew Marr said, if you listen to the prime ministers of those four countries talking about Brussels, talking about migration, they make Nigel Farage sound like a Foreign Office diplomat. So right across Europe, we see the growth and development of political movements, of people that say, we actually love Europe. We love the different nationalities of Europe, the different peoples of Europe. In my case, the different wines of Europe. We love Europe. But what we don't like is this attempt by the European Union to hijack the word Europe. To them, Europe is that flag. Europe is that anthem. Europe are those glass and steel structures. Europe are tens of thousands of highly paid bureaucrats. And they think, because they've got all of this, that they own Europe and the word. Well, they don't. We, the individual countries and peoples of Europe, we own the word Europe, not them. So I'm pleased to see this growth of these new political movements everywhere, with, of course, one very curious exception. What on earth is going on in the politics of this country? How much more humiliated can the Irish nation be than for years being run by the Troika? The indignity, a few years back, of your budget being seen by the German government before it was put to the Dáil. You are now not even a net beneficiary anymore. you are paying into the European budget, and your Taoiseach said in Strasbourg the other week he's happy for Ireland to pay even more into the European budget. Are you pleased about that? Yes, he's happy for you to pay more. You've heard this morning just how much you've lost by giving away what should be yours, 200 miles of the Atlantic Ocean. Your politicians have taken you into a currency which, frankly, you're ill-suited for. And yet, I get told that Ireland is a very pro-EU country. Oh yes, Michael O'Leary told me, so it must be right. And there is this perception, because in Lisbon 1, O'Leary was against the treaty, do you remember? And called the European Commission the evil empire. But then, when it came to Lisbon 2, he was for the treaty and thought the European Union was wonderful. I'm sure, folks, that change of heart had nothing to do with money whatsoever. But we're always told, Ireland is a pro-EU country. Varadkar said it when he was in Strasbourg the other week. The perception of the media across Europe is that Ireland is a very pro-EU country, very servile to the demands of Brussels. And my analysis is this. I don't think Ireland is a pro-EU country. I think the political, media and big business class of Dublin, they're the ones. They're the ones. Oh, they love it. They love it. You want to meet the Irish men and women that work for the European Commission. I meet them. They love it. And what's not to like? 16% top rate tax, 10,000 civil servants in Brussels earning more than the British Prime Minister, 7 or 8 weeks holiday a year, no chance of being sacked if you're incompetent. In fact, from what I can see, you probably get promoted. And, well, they must have found Mr. Van Rompuy somewhere, I don't know. And probably the best pension deal any of these men and women are going to get anywhere in the world. For them, what's not to like? But the problem, folks, is that they dominate the media conversation. And whilst there are people, individuals in this country, some independent politicians, academics, some journalists, whilst there are people in this country that will stand up and make the counter-argument, what you do not have in this country is an organised, mobilised organisation that is out there with the absolute distinct attempt from day one to take away from the politicians their votes. Because if I learn anything in UKIP, however good an intellectual argument may be, however powerfully you make a point, it's only when they think they might lose their job because of you that they start to sit up and listen. There are a very large number of men and women in this country who, frankly, at this moment in time, do not have the democratic representation that they deserve. And that is something, I think, it's up to you, of course, but I think that is something in a democracy that needs to be put to an end. And those of you that are here today and are keen and enthusiastic and believe that the nation state is the building block, the essential building block, that democracy is the system that we wish to live in, it is incumbent now upon you to organise, to mobilise and to put up candidates and to fight those European elections in just 15 months from now, because you will win elected representation. And once you win elected representation, you become part of the national debate. And as you become part of the national debate, they will call you all the names under the sun. You will, of course, all be homophobes. You will all be racists. You will all be xenophobes. You will all be bigots. And this is because when our side of the argument talks about national democracy, when our side of the argument talks about pride in our nation, when our side of the argument talks about controlling our borders and having a sensible, grown-up immigration policy, when our side of the argument talks about these things, they can't fight back against us with arguments, so what they do with their abuse is they go for the man and not for the bull. But actually, none of it matters, because whatever the mainstream media say about a new political movement in this country that is standing up for the right values, it doesn't matter. There's a chap in America who's proved this to a certain extent. Now, whether you like Trump or not isn't really the point. But what did the Donald do? He courted as much controversy as he possibly could. Because controversy means you get more front-page headlines and you dominate the news agenda. And he allied that to an extraordinary use of the medium known as Twitter. And by using Twitter, he goes round the back of the political class, the media class, the big business class. He reaches straight to American men and women and voters, and he's now got 47.6 million followers. Can I suggest that whatever happens in Ireland, that you make sure that mobilisation of the internet is absolutely up there as one of the top things that you must do. This European project is not going to work. Europe has been divided from north to south by the euro. The euro has been bad for Ireland, but arguably it's been a total catastrophe for countries like Greece. And economic and monetary union is not going to work in Europe unless the Germans become like the Greeks or the Greeks become like the Germans. And far from making this a union in which countries are coming together and people are getting friendlier, we now actually see north-south enmity because of the capital transfers required to keep those Mediterranean countries in the euro. So we have that split. And we also have an east-west split. These prime ministers in Hungary and Poland mean business. These people lived under Nazism. They lived for decades under communism. When the wall fell, they reached out to the West and they held our hand because we offered them not just the European Union, we offered them NATO membership as well. So that is why they so enthusiastically joined the Union. But now I hear my Polish and Hungarian and Czech friends saying, in fact, I was with Václav Klaus this week, the former Czech president, and he said, it looks to me like my country is going back into a new form of communism, where your parliaments are overruled, your courts are overruled. So this union will not work. It does not work. It is increasingly unloved by the peoples of Europe. We, in the Brexit campaign, I think I can say, have more than done our bit thus far. But now it is time for you to make these arguments, to organise and to mobilise in this country. And I wish you Godspeed in doing so. And if I can ever be of any help or any assistance, I'll hop on a plane to Dublin and come and give it to you. Thank you very much. Now, I said I've been a Eurosceptic since the early 1990s. I am but a boy and a beginner compared to somebody who's in this room, and I've got here a letter from 1962 with Tony Coughlin's name on it that was written to the Irish Times, and Tony's been campaigning for 60 years. 60 very, at times, lonely years for nation-state democracy and for Ireland, and I admire him, and I'm happy to present him with me.
Nigel, this is great, isn't it? I mean, I'm astonished. If we'd had this in 2010, we'd be running the country now.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm so thrilled. No, I really mean, I am so thrilled to be here today. I have been to new Eurosceptic movements all over Europe over the course of the last 20 years. But of course, I was involved with the birth of UKIP. And it was very difficult for us in those days. I mean, we get no media coverage, no money, and meetings were about all we had. And I remember once in a village in Wiltshire called Hanging Langford, and I was doing a meeting in the village hall, and we put an advert in the pub, we put an advert in the post office, we leafleted every house in the area, and I was optimistic. I thought, well, I wonder how many people will turn up to hear the message. And do you know how many came to that meeting? None. None. My worst public meeting, no one turned up at all. And I had a few others where half a dozen came, or whatever. But let me tell you, when we kicked off UKIP as a party with our intention to fight elections, and we were further down the road than a movement is here at the moment, we couldn't have dreamt of a crowd. Not just of this size, but hey, of this enthusiasm. So you've got something here. There is a gap in the political market here in Ireland. And I tell you what, you lot, I think, are going to fill it.
What do you think is at the heart of this revolt, this revolution? Because Trump's identified it, you identified it. There's something there. It's the EU, of course, but there's something more profound.
Yeah, do you know, if you go back and think about the people that used to govern us, you know, in America, people like General Eisenhower, who'd masterminded the D-Day landings, became the president. You know, we had people who sat in Parliament for us in Westminster, people who'd been coal miners, who'd got to the top of their profession in the trade union, people who'd run charities, people who'd been decorated for bravery in war. The people that used to represent us and make our laws were people who had experience of life. And what has happened right across the Western world is that's been replaced by career politicians. And I look at the UK. The UK, over the course of the last 20 years, basically, they all go to the same handful of schools, they all go to the same university, they all do the same degree, they all marry each other's sisters. I mean, the whole thing's... And to them, the most important thing is getting re-elected. The most important thing is keeping that career going. And because of that, they have fallen victim to the big business lobby. Don't underestimate the size and the power of the multinationals, the big banks, the Goldman Sachs, the JP Morgans. You know, they want a world of corporatism, a world where they effectively own the political class, own the lawmaking system of government, and that's why Brussels is, I mean, it is the temple to the globalists, because Brussels actually, many of them see as the prototype for something far bigger. Hillary Clinton wanted America to be part of what she called a hemispheric common market. She wanted to take the Brussels model and extend it further. So we've got career politicians, we've got people there without conviction, people there without courage, falling victim to big government arguments, big business arguments. And what we need in politics are some real people. That's what we need.
And also, we need to have a conversation. I mean, the media's role in all of this is really central, isn't it? That it's almost the first problem that you need to address, to create conditions where you can actually even talk about these things.
Very difficult. I mean, take the immigration debate in the United Kingdom. I didn't discuss immigration in 1999 when I was first elected. It wasn't an issue. But by 2004, it had become an issue because we'd opened the door to 8 and then 10 former communist countries. And for daring to talk about this subject, I mean, I've been demonised in just the most extraordinary way. Now, I'm pleased to say, over a decade on from making this argument, I think now people realise, actually, the point I was making was a valid, respectable point. But it is difficult not to be demonised. It is difficult not to be demonised. But, you know, I said earlier, the worst thing is not to be talked about. You know, if they're attacking you, if the establishment are attacking you for what you stand for, don't let it worry you. Oh, look, a foreign flag! A foreign flag!
I think it's John Claude Dunker, is it?
I saw something like that. I saw something like that in the referendum. And it reminded me that when I started doing this 25 years ago, I used to protest against the establishment. And now the establishment are protesting against us. We must be getting
somewhere. Trump is not really about Trump. Trump is about something much bigger. He's about the same thing you're about, isn't he?
Well, you know, Trump called Brexit. He called it on Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan about 3 months before. Trump said, I think the people of the UK are going to vote for Brexit because they want to make their own laws, have their own identity and control their own borders. Boom, boom, boom. He got it, didn't he? He absolutely understood what it was all about. And I don't think Trump thought he had a cat's chance in hell of winning the presidency until Brexit happened. And once Brexit happened, he began to think, this is interesting. We've got a model here that we can follow. I went to Mississippi. And that was amazing. So I turned up at Mississippi, and the governor said, I want you to speak with Trump at a fundraising dinner for about 1,000 people. I said, fine, no problem at all. We did the dinner. Afterwards, it was off to the basketball stadium where there were 20,000 people. And I thought, well, this is going to be real fun. I'm going to sit there and watch how Trump does this. And it's starting at 7:30. At 7:20, Trump's aide comes over to me and says, we'd like you to speak. I said, I'm sorry. And at that point, Donald walks over to me, says, right, I get to this bit in my speech, and I call you up on stage. I said, what, you're the warm-up act? I don't think I've ever been so nervous in all my life as going up in front of 20,000 Mississippians. But, I mean, something I'll never forget as long as I live. But what was interesting, John, was afterwards, I kind of plunged into the crowd to talk to people, to find out who they were. And, you know, the conversations I was having with those people were exactly the same conversations I was having with people who wanted to vote for Brexit. They felt that government was remote. They felt there was nobody in mainstream politics expressing their opinion. They felt they felt the establishment treated them with a sneering contempt. and they wanted a change in politics. And I think, actually, my view, and I really mean this, you know, there are some people who think that Brexit and Trump was a short outburst of anger and we will go back to normal service. That's what Mr. Blair certainly thinks. Tell you what, in England they boo a lot louder than that. Yeah, that is what Blair thinks, that is what Macron thinks. They all think it's going to be okay, it'll all be reversed. I think that we will look back in 100 years at 2016 and we'll see it as a pivot point, as a moment at which the Western world said, we've had enough of globalism, we've had enough of governments that, frankly, condemn us for being patriotic about our country, about our flag, about our people. I mean, I have to say, I've seen more EU flags in Dublin than I've seen your own national flag over the course of the last couple of days. I can't believe it. So John, my view is this is a fundamental change that will sweep out across the world. And when people see, a couple of years from now, just how much better Trump has made the lives of ordinary Americans, then I think there'll be a desire for it everywhere.
But, you know, the media narrative is completely unhinged on this. I mean, the version of Trump they're telling us this kind of overgrown baby in the White House. They're ignoring the fact that there's a revolution happening under their noses, and they're selling this narrative to the extent that I would say, if you go around Ireland, people are terrified to actually say a word that isn't disparaging of Trump, except they get into a room like this and they get courage from each other, and then it's okay. Yeah,
well, I'm used to being on my own, it's okay. No, I mean, look, it's been very difficult for me. I mean, I spent 25 years fighting for what I believed in. After the referendum, I suddenly became reasonably respectable, and then I played double acquits on the whole thing by backing Trump. So it was, you know, it was quite a big risk for me. Now, when people, you know, this is the point, isn't it? The point is that the EU globalist politics does nothing for ordinary men and women. That's the point.
Okay, so Ireland, like, what do you have to say to Ireland about our situation? Because our situation is bizarre at the moment. I mean, we're actually breaking away from our probably the strongest relationship in the world, economically and otherwise, and we're going to, you know, go into something unknowable, which is possibly on its last legs.
So many, when you really think about it, so many amazing things have happened over the course of the last 20 years. Just look at the relationship between our two countries over the last 20 years, how it's improved. You know, in every way it's improved, isn't it? The Queen coming to visit, the peace agreement. I mean, we're closer now, we're friendlier now than we've been for age. And we've had our own common travel area for all these decades, you know, and there is a, it's just good to see a lot of that enmity appears to have gone. And yet, there is potentially a problem here, isn't there? That if the European Union refused to give Britain a decent trade deal, then Ireland's farmers, particularly, are going to get very badly hurt by this, which is why Varadkar should be arguing in Brussels that whatever happens between the UK and the European Union, an exception has to be made for the Republic of Ireland. And made for historic reasons and for reasons of political sensitivity. So there is a problem here that Brexit may cause a little bit of a rift between us. I don't want that to happen. If I'm being objective about it, you're in a currency that's completely useless to you. It does nothing for you at all. You joined that currency, you halved your interest rates, it made the boom, the property boom and bust here far worse than it had to be. So you're in a currency that's of no use to you. You've now become a net contributor to the European Union, and Mr. Varadkar's happy for you to go on paying more and more and more. You haven't got your fishing waters. You're not truly the independent nation that your grandparents' generation strove for. That, to a large extent, I think, has been handed away. And I just think you do a damn sight better running your own affairs with a better, more open kind of politics. And that's what I think. Now, look, it's not for me to tell you what to do. All I can tell you All I can tell you is that if you get something organised and you contest those European elections, you'll give the establishment the fright of its life, and you'll start to change the narrative in this country. You know, just one word of truth that is out there, and suddenly everything changes. They thought I was speaking the unspeakable, the BBC and others. Well, maybe I was, because then people started to think the unthinkable, and we went from nothing to winning a national referendum. It can be done.
But this cycle of boom and bust has a very painful effect on the public mood. I mean, like in 2010, you know, if we'd had a movement then, we could have swept it all, everything before us. Yeah. The problem is that at a time, in Ireland particularly, we have a tendency when things seem to be going well, we have this pursuit of prosperity, which we had in the Celtic Tiger years. We're going into it now again. And on the face of it, it seems that, you know, we're in recovery, etc., etc. It's all about timing, isn't it?
Yes, but the point about timing is you have to be organised and mobilised and ready, don't you? And then, you know, you can't wait for the moment to emerge and then say, let's do something, because it's too blooming late by then. I think this. I do understand what you say. At the moment, the European Union is not very high on the list of concerns of most Irish people. I understand that. But the reason I talked about the European elections in 15 months' time is twofold. Firstly, fewer people vote in European elections. So those you can mobilise behind a cause, the effect of that vote is magnified, point one. Point two, all over Europe, significant numbers of people vote differently in European elections to the way they vote in national elections. It's a bit like an open shot on goal. It's a bit like, you know, we can do what we want here. And I honestly think, because I've seen this all over Europe, I honestly think that a political movement that puts up candidates for those elections in 15 months' time here in Ireland will win seats. And if you win seats, you're part of the big picture. If you win seats, you can start to change the whole narrative. So I think, John, I honestly, hand on heart, the opportunity is there. Even in difficult times, because it's a European election, you can still establish a presence, get a more consistent voice, and then when the moment comes, you're ready for it.
What about you? What are you going to do?
Well, I've got 15 months left as an MEP. I'm still leading a group in the European Parliament. Running UKIP as I did for all those years, if I'm honest with you, took a fairly big toll on everything. I mean, I don't say I regret doing it, I don't. I'm pleased I did it, but I've enjoyed life so much more since I stepped down as leader of UKIP, is all I can say. I was a businessman. I was in the commodities business, buying and selling copper, aluminium, stuff like that. As I often say to audiences, you know, I can say hand on heart that unlike most politicians, I worked in the private sector for 20 years, and I worked damned hard up until lunchtime every single day. I was told, the day I was elected to the European Parliament in 1999, I was told by Christopher Booker, a veteran Fleet Street journalist. He's been on the Sunday Telegraph since 1961, Christopher, founding editor of Private Eye. So he's an amazing journalistic figure and friend of mine and supporter of mine. You know, when UKIP was that big, he was there supporting me. And Booker said to me the day I was elected, he said, young man, because I was then, he said, you need to make your mind up. Either you're in politics to be something and to be somebody, or you're in politics because you want to do something. And I resolved that day, I was in politics to do something. I was in politics to change things. I was in politics to shake things up. And so, frankly, if Brexit goes through in a reasonable way, I'm done with politics because I've achieved the goal that I had of going in.
And
but if in 18 months' time they've made an absolute horlicks of Brexit, then I'll have to go back and fight the buggers again, won't I?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Brilliant. That was good fun.